Welcome back to your Thursday Buckeye Talk from cleveland.com. Doug Lesmerises, Nathan Baird, Stephen Means, getting it up in the afternoon again. I thought this would be rants on Thursday. Rants will be Friday. This is a discussion about Ohio State cornerbacks. We got to speak with 9 players and 2 coaches on Thursday. That was safeties coach Perry Eliano, corners coach Tim Walton. We talked to several safeties, and we talked to 4 corners, and we're going to do corners first here. We'll do safeties early next week. So that means we are talking about the 4 guys we believe, are the top 4 cornerbacks in that room right now. And that's Denzel Burke as a third-year starter. That's Jordan Hancock as a third-year guy in the program who just has not played much because he was battling injuries all of last year. That's Davison Igbinosun as a transfer from Ole Miss, where he played a lot last year, second-year college player, and that's Jyaire Brown as a second-year guy who was forced into duty a decent amount last year and is learning from that. So let's start with Denzel Burke, and let's start with the continued evolution of this guy. I think we are sort of curious about 2 things with Denzel Burke. Health and, where his head's at. So, Nathan, where's his head? Where's his body? How's he doing?
Well, yeah, he ran down a whole list of all the things that were wrong with him last year. We obviously knew the hand. We knew the shoulder that was coming off of the year. I think he mentioned ankle in there. I think he mentioned fingers in there, which somehow was separate from the hand issue. And just a guy who had all the momentum in the world coming out of last season. And then the injuries hit in preseason camp, and it seemed to just keep him sort of discombobulated all season. And I did not feel like we were watching the same player. And only late in the season did we start to feel like I thought he settled back into something closer to the form that he had shown as a freshman or shown that he should be heading towards going into his second year. But I thought he played pretty well against Georgia. I thought that was sort of the story of his season, that it was just some really out of character play for him early, looking a little bit lost on the field to the point where you knew something was really off. But then by the time he got on the field against Georgia, I thought you started to see him much more closely approximate what he's supposed to be. So then now, how do you carry forward off of that? How do you build through this winter and spring off of that and try to maintain that momentum now into the season?
Are we going to have to create, we like having, not awards, but the
JK Dobbins Award.
Oh, maybe that's it. We create boxes for guys. Everybody knows what the Marshawn Lattimore thing is by now, right? Yeah. 2 years lost to injuries. You come out, you're basically an All-American in year 3. How would we describe, might be JK Dobbins, is it you bust out as a true freshman, sophomore year gets sideways, and then you come back and kill it as a junior, Stephen? Is that it?
Yeah, I think that's the JK Dobbins Award. They all have, because I love how they're all converting around what you do in that third year. But so far, candidates are Denzel Burke and Travion Henderson, the JK Dobbins Award, where you show it, and then for whatever the reason is, you lose it, and then you get it back, and you're the best possible version of yourself, potential All-American level self, and then you're also the NFL.
So how much, Stephen, should we expect that this will fit Denzel Burke? We know what J.K. Dobbins did in his junior year. Ran for 2,000 yards, was a workhorse back, dynamic, tough, really valuable to a really good Ohio State team. What is that? Is that actually what we're talking about, Denzel Burke?
I'm on alert for it because the way he talked, it very much suggested that I wasn't good last year because my body was hurt, and I was too busy focusing on these aching parts of my body than I was on playing the right type of football. And it didn't allow me to take the step I wanted to take. And I don't have to worry about that anymore. And now he used the word foundation. His foundation was off a lot of the times because you're busy worried about injuries. If you're not worried about injuries and you can get back to your foundation, maybe you take that next step that you should have taken last year, but you take it now. And maybe it's even bigger now because also you've been in this same system for 2 years.
So, Nathan, did you get the sense that, what did last season do to Denzel Burke? Is he humbled? Is he mad? Does he feel like the haters were out to get him? Does he think it was great for him to have to deal with adversity? Like, what's the mood? Because, again, if we're going to try to put this in a JK Dobbins box, JK Dobbins, going into that junior year in 2019, there was a lot of discussion from, I think, both JK Dobbins and Tony Alford around, last year I was trying to hit home runs. I wasn't taking what was there. I was trying to live up to what I did as a freshman. I got inside my own head. Like we're very forthright with that was jacked up. And we know exactly what has to happen for us to get better at this. And the injury component makes it a little bit different, but like where do you think Denzel Burke is psychologically after having a year like that?
Well, but I think the injury component is an important part of it, and that's where him and Travion Henderson both differed from the J.K. Dobbins situation, which really was more just a guy who just lost it, got thinking about the wrong things at the wrong time. And for Burke, just from listening to him a little bit today, I don't think it's like a me against the world kind of thing, but because of the injury, I think they know, and we've talked about his injury situation, but it wasn't apparent at the time. At the time, all that criticism was coming down on him for looking, again, like I said, just kind of lost at times on the field, and people wondering like what was wrong with him. I think he wanted to probably be able to say to them, well, I'm hurt in these various ways, and didn't have that opportunity. So I think that is part of it, that he knows that he hasn't been able to fully show, was maybe deprived of being able to have the year that he wanted to have, that everyone expected him to have, they expected to have for himself. I'm thinking back though to Cam Brown talking at the Combine about just what he had been hearing behind the scenes out of Ohio State coaches, and that there was a different mindset here, because that the way that season finished, I think gave Denzel Burke some indication of where he should have been, where he can be, where he's going.
So let's reevaluate. Let's reestablish some baselines of what Ohio State's cornerback play was a year ago, just to remind ourselves. So Denzel Burke, as a true freshman in 2021, he played 734 snaps. That was the most on the defense. As a true freshman, he played more than anybody. That's crazy. It's like, hey, Minnesota, that's a weird. Oh, we're at Minnesota to start the game. I can't even remember the guy's name. Not Eli Ricks. Who was the guy that Ohio State had? They were like, what? No, not Ryan Watts. The other guy. The guy who had the Google, Seven Banks.
Oh, Seven Banks. Yeah. How do you forget the name Seven Banks?
Top three answers on the board. Name that unsuccessful Ohio State cornerback. And we just went bang. We were buzzing in. Seven Banks. Seven Banks is like walking around on the field against Minnesota. And we're like, is he going to play? And it was like, Denzel Burke's going to start. It's like, okay, well, I guess we're going to do this now. Denzel Burke plays the most snaps of anybody. 734. Last year, he plays 585 snaps. So that's still a lot. But it's fewer because he's dealing with injury. His PFF grade, just a guide. 68.8 as a true freshman, 67.9 last year. So similar. But it just felt different. I think expectations were factored into that. Perceptions factored into that. There's a lot of things that go into that. So that's the number one corner, plays 585 snaps. The number two corner for Ohio State last year in snaps is the guy who started the year as the fourth corner. It's JK Johnson. He plays 407 snaps, which is a lot. His PFF grade is 58.8, which is not good. And he's not here anymore. So the guy who was second in snaps is not here. Third in snaps is Cam Brown. He plays 317. That's like practically half as many as Denzel Burke. That's the guy you expect to be your number two corner. He's battling injuries all year, as he did for most of his career. 317. Fourth in snaps is Jyaire Brown, true freshman. They're like, hey, can you do this? Jyaire Brown, 195 snaps. His PFF grade is 69.1. Cam Brown's was 67.5. So Denzel Burke, Cam Brown, and Jyaire Brown, as a true freshman, they all have basically the same PFF grade. And then fifth in cornerback snaps for Ohio State is Jordan Hancock, who we waited for all year. 103 snaps. PFF grade 44.5. That's not good. Meanwhile, at Ole Miss, Davison Igbinosun, 565 snaps as a freshman. That's 20 fewer snaps than Denzel Burke played. So he's here now. So you're at his PFF grade was 66. So his PFF grade and number of snaps is very similar to Denzel Burke. So Ohio State trades out JK Johnson for Davison Igbinosun, who plays more and by the PFF grade plays better. So that is just, we knew that, Nathan, but even JK Johnson played 400 snaps with a PFF grade under 60. That matches what our eyeballs saw, which was like sometimes the corner play left something to be desired a year ago. And the number of snaps for who you thought compared to who you thought was going to play tells you why.
Yeah, I mean, we talked a lot about it's interesting coming off of this pod we just did about depth, because we talked about depth as related to the cornerback room last year too, and how only having 6 scholarship players, all that stuff. But it really wasn't that there were only 6. It was that the 6 just didn't play that well even when they played. Now, some of that was injury related, but when you had someone like J.K. Johnson in his second year who played all those snaps, but maybe didn't really elevate the level of play in that room, and then you even had when Denzel Burke could play, when Cam Brown could play in big chunks of the season, the performance didn't follow. And so it's got to be both. I mean, they retain a lot of those guys, push through to another year, but bringing in Davison Igbinosun, someone with his background, with his level of experience and his physicality, we'll get into him more, I know, but like they needed to just ramp up the level of talent in that room. Because even with someone like Denzel Burke, and maybe it's the other way that he doesn't. I know he was a freshman All-American, whatever, as a freshman, but like just that PFF score doesn't really compare probably to what JK Dobbins did as a true freshman. Like I feel like the actual impact was bigger on the game. Burke was really important because they needed that position so badly. They had so many other problems and needed someone to step up. But I don't think that level of play. We still haven't seen that level of play yet from Denzel Burke. It's still a thing that's kind of on the horizon.
And so the other thing here, again, the numbers match what we've talked about with Denzel Burke, which is he got better in the second half. So when you look at the PFF grades, 4 of the first 5 games he played, his coverage grade in those individual games was under 60. Notre Dame, 54. Arkansas State, 59. Toledo, 72. Rutgers 55, Michigan State 55. And that's like what's up with Denzel Burke? He doesn't seem like he's playing as well as he played as a true freshman. And then he has like the surgical procedure, right? You get a little sense of okay, maybe he's going to be a little bit healthier. Now, the second half of the year, Iowa, coverage grade 71, Penn State 72, Northwestern 54. It's blowing, it's a hurricane. Maryland 62, Michigan 74, Georgia 69. So I do think, Stephen, as we think about this, I like Denzel Burke competing for the JK Dobbins Award. It's almost like he had 2 seasons last year. And so he is coming back from, hey, as a sophomore, maybe it didn't go as well as it went freshman year for you, but also second half of sophomore year was a whole lot better than first half of sophomore year, and you had something fixed in between, so kind of figured it out. It does feel like he should be on an upswing here because he's building off the way last season ended.
If he can be physical, he'll be fine, because we talk about the PFF grade from his freshman year to sophomore year, how it dropped down a little bit. Where you really see that take off is, his run defense grade going from 71.8 to 54.5, the tackling grade going from 76.1 to 53.6, which to the point of how many times last year did we say, yeah, I mean, you didn't really make a play on the ball, but then when the player caught the ball, you kind of just moved out the way and let him score a touchdown. You weren't, trying to bring a guy down after he caught the ball either. The pass rush grade for what that means for cornerbacks, 70.4 as a freshman, and then the 47.8 as a sophomore. Where I mean, the first snap of his season last year was them sending him on a blitz that ends up with a 54-yard, completion for Notre Dame that game. The coverage did get better as he got healthier. His coverage grade was actually better this past season than it was as a freshman, from 66.8 to 70.6. But it's the overall of it, is the physicalness that he needs to play with, the ability to get guys down, the ability to make a play on the ball, all that stuff you can't do when you're thinking about your 4 or 5 different injuries that you suffered. So maybe it is just as simple as my body doesn't hurt, so I'm back to who I'm supposed to be, which is why I'm having a great spring so far.
Nathan, any other Denzel Burke vibes or words from what he said on Thursday?
Not from what he said, but Stephen, I think, was at his table more than I was. I just think it's worth pointing out again that it's not just, all the things we've been hearing from other coaches leading into today, other players leading into today, are what have maybe had my antenna up on Denzel Burke. That it's we already knew. I mean, he's coming back. He's got all this experience. Even with Davison Igbinosun coming in, I've always assumed Denzel Burke will be starting on September 2nd. But I think what all these people are saying about him and what that could mean, what he could be this year as opposed to the past 2 years, is, I think, starting to get intriguing. And Stephen, did he talk about any physical changes for him? Because he's just looked different to me on the field too in practice so far.
No, he didn't. Nothing like really stood out from that. As far as like physically changing his body, no. I just think he was a physical player as a freshman, and he's gotten back to that a little bit, but he didn't really get into depth any further with that stuff. No.
All right, Denzel Burke. I think you don't want to put too many expectations on guys, but to me, my general view of the corners is, can Denzel Burke have an all Big Ten kind of season? And then is there some kind of competition with Jordan Hancock and Davison Igbinosun to be a good number 2 corner? And then the third guy gives you good depth when you need it, guard against injury, maybe rotate a little bit. If you say that you wind up with a little bit of rotation with Hancock and Igbinosun, that I don't think that would seem outrageous to me. But that Denzel Burke, who as a freshman led the defense in snaps, can we set that? I think, is Denzel Burke going to lead this defense in snaps in 2023? That certainly seems, Stephen, like that would be on the table. Just with, they do like to rotate on the defensive line. Maybe it'll be Tommy Eichenberg. I don't know, but I just think Denzel Burke's going to be out there basically every snap that matters all season.
Yeah, I think that's on the table. That might depend on where Hancock and Igbinosun are by the fall camp, because I could see it being that's Denzel's spot, and then there's a rotation on the other side with Jordan Hancock and Davison Igbinosun. But I can also just see all 3 of those guys just kind of playing equal snaps, where it's rotating 3 guys through 2 spots.
But I'd be surprised. Like, Denzel Burke, I think, is somewhat significantly more established than those other 2 guys, right?
Yeah, well, yes. If you had to go off of experience playing college football, quite frankly, it'd probably Denzel Burke first, Davison Igbinosun second, and then Jaire Brown has actually played more college football than Jordan Hancock has the last 2 years he's been here, so he'd probably be 4th on that hierarchy. So, but like I said, it's from an experience standpoint, he's the seniority in the room. But if it feels like you've got 3 guys who are, if Tim Walton gets to a spot where by September 2nd he feels like he's got 3 guys he has 100% equal level trust in, I wouldn't rule that out. 3 guys through 2 spots. But also, yes, Denzel Burke just stays on the field and the other 2 rotate is also on the table.
And now we're just having the Doug Lesmerises, Kerry Combs yelling about cornerback rotation fight all over again. When in 2016, after I said to Kerry Combs, you all guys always talk about rotating, but then you never actually do it. And he was like, we're going to do it. Garyon Conley, 599 snaps at corner in 2016. Marshawn Lattimore, 598. Denzel Ward, 447. That's 3 guys through 2 spots.
I could see that.
So I would be surprised if Ward's not kind of significantly number 1.
Burke.
But
Yeah.
Well, who did I say? Denzel Ward.
You said
There's
Ward.
too
You
many
said
Denzels.
Ward.
Maybe that's where they got, because there is a little bit of a separation between where Conley was and where Denzel Ward was that year. So maybe instead of the gap being 2 and 3, it's still 1 and 2, but it's still all around the same thing. But you get to the end of the year, Denzel Burke's played 110 more snaps than those two guys have.
I also would
the other
say
way around.
Denzel Burke, I am talking about, not Denzel Ward. Denzel Burke, right, Nathan? Denzel Burke, good year, goes to the league. Jordan Hancock and Davison Igbinosun. Davison Igbinosun can't. Jordan Hancock could, but Jordan Hancock's barely played so far. So, like in that year, Lattimore and Conley were done. Ward was back for one more year. So not that, that's the number one thing in the hierarchy, but I do think maybe that's like, listen, man, this guy's good. He's a 3-year starter at Ohio State. He's not leaving the field, and then everybody else does whatever they want to do because he's putting a cherry on top of, even with the blip the first half of last year, has been a very, very good Ohio State career, and then he's gone. We don't see a lot of 4-year starters at Ohio State, which is like Billy Price leads Ohio State in all-time snaps or whatever it is, games, because he was one of those rare exceptions. So I think this is Denzel Burke's position, and then everybody else can slot in, but like that guy's going to do his thing.
Yeah, I mean, Hancock is the epitome of the Hooker Lattimore watch list that we do every year.
Yeah.
Where you really are kind of out of it completely for 2 years for whatever reason. You don't play that much as a true freshman, as a lot of people don't. Then there's usually an injury component or something weird like that. And then third year, you're like, holy crap. And I could see that happening for him. I could see him having some kind of a huge breakout. He is running with the ones this spring. So we'll see what that means. But that's also usually not surprising that a holdover guy would be running with the ones over a guy who's only been here for a couple months in Igbinosun. We'll see what happens between now and September 2nd.
Can I just throw in a little point of information, by the way, when we were just talking about PFF grades? Just a guide. Last year, Davison Igbinosun, 66, Denzel Burke, 67.9, Cam Brown, 67.5, right? It's like guys who played. I'm just looking at the 2016 stats because I have them up. Marshawn Lattimore, 90. It's a 90. It's like, oh, what does it look like? It's a 90, a 90.
That's what you call a top 10 pick.
Garyon Conley, 85.3, and Denzel Ward, 74.6. And then let's just look to see what Denzel Ward did the next year. I'm just curious. What did Denzel Ward the next year? 90.8. What does that look?
This is what I was saying. This is what I was saying before, that it's like Denzel Burke has been a solid football player for 2 years. I have not seen Denzel Burke the great football player yet. Consistently, like it just hasn't happened. Like I don't know what people are looking at.
But also, you're talking about what they were in all three of those situations. That's third year, because Jeff Okudah is above 92. His third year, if I believe, which we're talking about the first round corners here. So to your point of Denzel Burke might leave after the season, I understand he's a 3-year starter, but unless he's popping, I understand just a guy. But the first round corners at Ohio State have 90 PFF grades. So if he's going to be if he's going to be in that realm, he needs to be like at least 88.
And I'm not saying I don't see it in Denzel Burke. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, reminding people that we need to talk about what's, I think, ahead of him in greatness in terms of what we've already seen.
Jeff Okudah actually 82.8, which is like, but still. And then also Damon Arnett, 74.1. Mike Mayock was like, I don't care. I just think he's a baller. Like, okay. Great.
He doesn't count in this conversation at all.
That's why he's back in the media. Okay. So let's get into Davison Igbinosun, and we'll do it next on Buckeye Talk. So we don't want you to read too much into stuff. It's like, oh, why didn't they talk about Jordan Hancock more in that podcast? We weren't at his table as much. 4 tables, 3 people. Do the math. It's a little bit of like 5 Power 5 conferences, 4 playoff spots. So we're leaning a little bit because we raced back. We're squeezing this in. We got meetings. We just got back. I ate a pack of crackers. So we're talking about the guys that we talked to the most. And Steven, you were with Ole Miss transfer Davison Igbinosun for a while. And by the way, we're super interested in that guy because we don't know much about him yet. What's the vibe?
He wants to be Jeff Okudah. He looks at Jeff Okudah and not just, yes, as good as Jeff Okudah, but also that's the last time we had a corner here who looked like him, a bigger corner, length, physicality at the line of scrimmage, great tackler, good sound technique and coverage, even if he's not the fastest corner. We haven't had that since Jeff. And so that's a guy that he's really trying to model his game after. He's a guy from Northeast Ohio. Not Northeast Ohio, the Northeast of America, from New Jersey, and ended up at Ole Miss. He felt like he was under-recruited for whatever the reasons are, because he had no relationship with Ohio State coming out of high school. He was a top 150 recruit, but he had no relationship with them. But a lot of that was because Ohio State locked in on its corners a lot earlier than he maybe came along in that recruiting process. Spent the year at Ole Miss, decided to go into the portal, and he told a really interesting story of how he even got into contact with Ohio State. He was back at his high school in New Jersey, Union High School, lifting, and a Boston phone number pops up on his cell phone. And he's like, I don't know anybody from Boston. They're like, who is possibly calling me from Boston? And it's Ryan Day. And from that moment on, he's pretty much known exactly where he wanted to be. He wanted to be at Ohio State, and he used the term. I mean, we wrote a whole long package about Ohio State being king of the North. He kind of put a really good stamp on that and calling Ohio State the best team in the North over the past decade or so. And to wrap this long soliloquy up here, he thought Ohio State should have won the national championship last year. And the reason they didn't came down to a couple of plays, which I think we have talked about what those plays are at this point. And what was missing in those plays was a cornerback like him who had the physicality to match up in some of those positions and eliminate those plays. And if you have that guy, those plays don't happen and Ohio State wins the national championship. So it's the Jeff Okudah effect. This is a guy from the North who loved Ohio State as a kid, and Ryan Day getting into contact with him, but also he sees exactly how he fits in and what was missing, and he can add the exact thing Ohio State was missing from last year's defense.
So when we were talking about this before, and Stephen was conveying the story of the Boston phone number popping up, I was trying to do a Ryan Day Boston accent of and then Nathan said it sounded Australian. So I'm not going to do it here. I am trying to work on, I was kind of doing it in the car to myself of my Jerry Emig, Ohio State Sports Information Director, Minnesota accent impersonation, and my Ryan Day, because in my head I've decided that I think Ryan Day drops into an incredible New England accent whenever he's alone in his office, and them having a conversation of like, oh geez, and like, pack the cat. And so I'm not ready there. So, but I love the idea. Stephen, there's part of me that wanted to be like, a Boston phone number popped up and Davison Igbinosun answered, and it was Jason Tatum. And then it was like, hey, cool, why is Jason Tatum? And then he decided to go to Ohio State. Like, it's just a non sequitur of like, it was Bill Belichick just saying, hey. But actually, it makes sense that it was Ryan Day. So Tim Walton, the cornerbacks coach, did get asked about this. It's like, what? You look in the portal? Why you go after this guy? Toughness, length, competitiveness. I think he said height at the top of the route, which is like, hey, ball's in the air. You're playing big. You can, catch point, that kind of thing. He feels like a guy, Nathan, that you'd go get in the portal. So it is one of these things, and it's like, hey, why didn't Ohio State recruit him before? There was just a whole thing here. Ohio State's been enough in New Jersey that I think maybe if we had been in like the heyday of Kerry Combs, cornerback recruiter, maybe they're on this before, but they got trapped in a little bit of a thing for a little while there, right?
Or I'll say this real quick. Or if Jeff Hafley was still the coach here, because he's got the in out in that area, and he had already pulled like Cody Simon out of there. They're in there.
They've been in New Jersey. They've like they know they're not unfamiliar. It's not like the guys from Maine or Kansas, and it's like, I don't know, they just don't ever recruit there. So, but Nathan, when you hear like the way Tim Walton talked about him, this feels like the kind of thing where you see the guy's film, you see the production that he got on the field early, and that this, I mean, I don't know, I can't help it. There's a part of me like feels bad for Ole Miss. It's like, hey, congrats on winning that recruit and then playing him right away. And then he's like, cool, I'm good enough to go to Ohio State now. And it's like, I guess that's how the portal works. But when you hear Tim Walton talk about it, it's like, yep, I don't think we have any illusions about, well, why is this guy here? It's like, no, we know exactly why this guy is here.
Yeah, and I'm trying to remember. I talked to the coach at Union, Lou Grosso, right after Igbinosun committed to Ohio State a couple months ago, and I'm trying to remember exactly what he said about why he thought he was maybe a little bit under recruited. He was like a two-way player in high school. I think there might have been some teams that didn't necessarily know if he was a corner because of his size. But it's interesting, one of the reasons we got to where we are with Ohio State's secondary the last couple of years is because a defensive coordinator left in Jeff Hafley, and so did the prospect that would have solved a lot of problems in Clark Phillips. And now they've brought in two guys this offseason in Davison Igbinosun and Jihad Carter, who left where they were because the defensive coordinator left for other jobs, or was on his way out. And that kind of opened the door for why those guys went in the portal and why Ohio State was able to go grab them. So it's kind of like coming around full circle. It's just a little bit belated for Ohio State because they still had to pay the price these last couple of years.
And looking at Igbinosun's 247 profile, like he wasn't even a top 200 recruit in that 2022 class until the turn of the calendar year in January. He spent a lot of that time in the mid 400s, mid 500s. So under recruiting, it wasn't just that Ohio State did him. Ole Miss was probably his best offer. The other schools who were really in the mix for him were Duke, Kentucky, Pittsburgh, and Tennessee. So it's not like him ending up in the SEC was a bit implausible, but it's not like Alabama and Georgia and USC and Texas and those types of schools were on him, and Ohio State just wasn't.
You know what actually is a little bit weird about this? As I attempt to learn about the current Ohio State football player live on a podcast, because I should have probably learned before. Google machines, man. Google machines make everybody smart. So I'm reading about when Davison Igbinosun commits to Ole Miss at the All-American Bowl. Mm-hmm. And he had been formerly committed to Rutgers at some point. And he has a quote that says, "It was back and forth. I felt like if I went to Rutgers, I could have regretted that chance of not going to the SEC." So, okay, could have gone to Rutgers. But Chris Partridge is the guy who recruited him to Ole Miss, and Chris Partridge leaves. Chris Partridge is a Michigan guy. Chris Partridge came from the high school scene in New Jersey, went to Michigan, went to Ole Miss, and now is back at Michigan as a linebackers coach. Yep. And he did not follow Chris Partridge to Michigan. To Ohio State. That's a very easy, hey, the guy I want to play, hey, I could play Big Ten football now, big-time Big Ten football in the North. Oh, the guy who recruited me is going to Michigan. Let's do that. This is actually kind of a nice little how it worked out that Ohio State got him. But I do think it's one of those where probably in the portal, right? Maybe even more so when you're getting recruited in high school, like they have all kinds of film they can watch and they have all kinds of time and they can spend years on you. In the portal, you want to stand out. So when Tim Walton was asked, like, hey, have you coached a corner like this before this long? He's like, yeah, in the NFL. But when a 6'2" corner goes in the portal and it's like, oh, well, there's not 40 power 5, 6'2" corners in the portal, it makes sense why maybe Ohio State doesn't hesitate, jumps right away on this. Is there anything else about Davison Igbinosun, Stephen, that we need to know that we learned from this conversation with him on Thursday?
No, I think that pretty much sums it up. But to build on you could have just followed, Partridge to Michigan, which is another, northern team who's made the playoffs the past two years. I kind of asked him along those lines, not the Michigan thing, but just when you go in the portal, it would seem like you'd be more willing to be open to schools that you already had relationships with and not someone that you had never even talked to before. And that wasn't even in his thought process. Because I remember Trey Sermon had a relationship with Tony Alford that made that transition a little bit easier. Quarterback is different with Justin Fields, but you typically see, and Tanner McAllister followed his defensive coordinator over to Ohio State. Typically somebody you have a relationship with, he didn't even put that into his thought process of conversation. It was just, he still has a reverence for Ohio State. And even with the 2 losses to Michigan, that Ohio State's still the best team in the North. And, he's seen the quarterbacks they've produced, even if it's been a couple of years since they've done that. He was so, headstrong about the Jeff Okudah Ohio State cornerbacks. This is the best program up north that I could possibly go to, that any of those other factors didn't really even matter.
I also wonder, Igbinosun transferred to Ohio State like the last day of January, and Partridge left Ole Miss for Michigan like the first week of February.
Well,
So,
it was already in the works, though. It was already in the works. In fact, Partridge is who had recruited him to Ole Miss. That's where the connection was. So
then why didn't he go to Michigan?
I don't know, because he visited Michigan too.
Oh, he did visit Michigan when he was doing his transfer thing?
Yes.
Oh, interesting. Well, that's good for Ohio State. They got him. Okay. Davison Igbinosun, we're interested in him. Do you guys, again, we'll come back in a future podcast, and if it turns out that Jordan Hancock said awesome stuff that we just haven't had a chance to listen to yet, we'll talk about it. Do we think, Nathan, is your general approach that it's on for Jordan Hancock and Davison Igbinosun competing to start? Or when we have watched, it's been Burke and Hancock with the ones, Igbinosun and Jaire Brown with the twos. We had a field day talking about dominate the twos. Do you think Igbinosun can do that? Or given the way the coaches talked about Jordan Hancock a year ago, what Jordan Hancock showed in the offseason a year ago to prove that he was ready to help Ohio State, and then the injuries prevented him from doing that, do we have to assume now they love Hancock? As long as he's healthy, he's the guy.
No, I mean, I don't necessarily assume that. I mean, Igbinosun, that year, it's only 1 year, but that's a lot of experience to get on the field that Jordan Hancock has just never been able to get, and it's valuable. You learn a lot of stuff. You become a lot more comfortable out there. So I take what I was seeing this spring partially to be, this guy is a holdover. This guy did do a lot of things. It wasn't his fault that he got hurt, and you just showed up. So if you're going to have to put one with the ones and one with the twos to start the spring, and we're only a third of the way through the spring, halfway, then that makes sense to me. I still definitely have my eye on what that ends up looking like for opening night and what that ends up looking like every week after that. I just feel like that's what Ohio State should want and need, and is maybe getting now, is a really tough decision as to who the third cornerback is. That should be because you have three really good ones, so which one are you setting aside for the moment, as opposed to you have three that are all very uncertain and you don't know what you're getting from them, which is what they've had at times the last few years.
134 combined defensive snaps for Jordan Hancock in his 2 seasons at Ohio State. And again, Davison Igbinosun's up over 500 a year ago. So that's a factor, but as we see it right now, it's Burke and Hancock running with the ones. All right, we're going to come back and talk about number 4. I'm excited about number 4. We'll do it next on Buckeye Talk. So there's a saying that we like to do in my family, because my mom used to be a kindergarten teacher, and kindergartners are crazy. They just are constantly saying whatever. And so my mom just said this one time, but it's our example of what we say when we want people to stay focused. Because my mom said this to a kindergarten one time. She said, "We're not talking about motorcycles. We're talking about 4." Because it was they're learning numbers in kindergarten, and a motorcycle goes by outside, and the kid yells out, "There's a motorcycle outside." And my mom's having none of that. We're talking about 4. We're talking about 4, the number 4 corner for the Ohio State Buckeyes, who should be Jyaire Brown, who, as we said, was forced as a true freshman, not like Denzel Burke the year before, but 195 snaps. And I just will say, sometimes I just like a guy when they sit down. So I was at the Jaire Brown table, and he sat down, and I thought, I like this guy. He is a handle your business. I'm confident without being cocky. Matter of fact, this is how we do it kind of dude. And Nathan, I had said it in a video. It's he's the perfect number 4 corner, because it's not oh my gosh, you got to get this guy in the field in year 2, but also it feels okay, he's going to be ready to start by year 3. But if you need him, he'll be ready, because he played almost 200 snaps last year and held up pretty well. And he just has a sense of purpose about him. So I like this. To me, is good corner depth.
He's also the one person out of this group that doesn't really have high expectations that he has to live up to at this point. Denzel Burke comes out and does what he does as a true freshman All-American, etc. Davison Igbinosun, when you started for a year in the SEC, you should be great when you get here, right? You should definitely have. And Jordan Hancock, was a higher rated prospect, and it really started to kind of come along, and the expectations were building for him. So Jaire Brown's the one of the 3 who can sort of exceed expectations just by getting on the field last season. which he did. But he obviously was talked about, very warmly by Jim Knowles when he did get on the field last season. And I think it was always a good sign for, again, still what's to come. I feel like there's so many things this spring where we're talking about, like, file this away for 2024, because this cornerback room could change, as you already said, because of Denzel Burke for 2024. There could be a big opportunity there. And he's definitely, I think, on the radar of someone who that third, fourth year in the program, if he stays that long, could be a significant piece.
One of my favorite things about our pod is that every year we have these moments where it's like, just wait till this year. Just wait till this year. I mean, we did it for the 2023 year for 2.5 years, and now we're doing it for 24. But Denzel Burke said that Jaire Brown has the most impressive pick of anybody this spring. And he said it was on a curl route or like an out route. The way he just jumped it was just the most impressive thing they've seen this year. So I'll be on the lookout for that on Saturday to see if he has any more impressive picks. But I think I like the way you summed it up, Doug. He's a guy where there's no pressure for him to be the guy right now. But given how this cornerback room went last year, if there's a situation where for a week he has to be, it doesn't feel like he'll be in over his head out there. And I like how it feels like they're trying to also play him in different spots to kind of find him a role. They're working him out at that nickel corner spot as well. So he isn't demanding to be on the field, no. But he also is doing just enough to where he's put it in the coaching staff's mind that maybe let's just think about it at least, because we have 6 months to maybe think about what we want to do in certain spots.
He was asked to play 52 snaps in the Wisconsin game last year in week 4, and then played 28 snaps in week 10, 34 snaps. This is all on defense in week 11, 169 snaps at outside corner, 7 at slot corner last year. So again, sometimes we talk about, coaches will say, it just depends on the situation. Sometimes you want a guy to be able to do multiple things. Sometimes you want a guy to be able to focus. Jaire Brown, as we've seen when we saw the scrimmage on Saturday, he's a second-team outside corner, and he was third-team slot corner. But he said he did that in high school. He believes he has the skill set to be able to do that. When we talk about corners who could do that, which we have talked about here, because Jim Knowles has talked about it, and Ryan Day has talked about it, this is the example for now, because they're not messing with Burke and Hancock and Igbinosun when it comes to this. But Jaire Brown has a little bit of that versatility. And does that mean he's going to factor in a ton at that slot corner, slot safety role this year? No, I wouldn't think so. But I think you can put that on your radar for Jaire Brown, probably starting in 2024. And let's see where it fits based on his skill set, the team's needs, who comes back at different positions, how the defense evolves. But I can't state it enough. We could do a podcast on what does an ideal number 4 guy look like at a position. And really, he's a number 2 guy, but he's kind of not, because it's like if something happened, Igbinosun would go in next on both sides. But it looks like this. Second-year guy who's ready if you need him, but you're not quite freaking out, and then you just think year 3 is going to be really good. So I like where I like what he's shown. I like the way he talks about what he learned from a year ago. I like the fact that he held up last year when he was probably asked a little bit too much of him. And where he is now, versatility, confidence, smart. I think Jaire Brown is the kind of guy you want running with the twos at Ohio State right now. All right, we're going to end it there. We're just busy. We got a lot going on. This is the plan. Rants for Friday. We should have something a little different with a guest on, I think, Monday, and then early next week we'll make sure we get to safeties where we talk what Perry Eliano said, Sonny Styles, Josh Proctor, Lathan Ransom, guys like that. Make sure you're reading cleveland.com/OSU. Try the text at 614-350-3315. And, of course, make sure you are subscribed so you don't miss a podcast. For now, for Stephen Means and Nathan Baird, I'm Doug Lesmerises, and that was Buckeye Talk.